French court has delayed a decision on whether to demolish part of the Calais migrant camp known as the Jungle. Authorities had issued an eviction order due to come into force at 8 p.m. Central European time this evening. However, a legal challenge backed by 10 humanitarian agencies claimed that eviction would constitute a violation of fundamental human rights.
There's more than 3,000 people that they're living here. They have mosques here, schools here, everything inside the jungle. So it's become like a small city, and they're going to finish it. You know, people did a lot of work in here.
The French government has erected a container camp to rehouse between 800 and 1,000 people. Aid organisations counter that over 3,000 people live in the area due for demolition, 423 of them unaccompanied children. It's concern for the children that prompted the court to postpone a decision.
Forcing their way through a fence, the only solution these migrants can see after travelling thousands of kilometres from their home countries en route to northern Europe. But as they dash across Greece's border with the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, security forces intervene. A new tightening of controls by Macedonian authorities has left thousands stranded in Greece, with tension rising. Syrians and Iraqis are still being allowed through, but Afghans now find their way blocked, with moves to bus them back to Athens.
We don't want that, you know what I mean? We want to go further. This is all what we want. If you go back to Athens, what we can do? We have no money to buy, nothing to eat. Where we should go? We cannot go back to Afghanistan. If you go back to Afghanistan, you're going to be killed.
What should we do? If this border is closed, they should say at the first they close the Turkey border, they close the Iran border, that people not coming in Greece. Why they don't close the Turkey border?
Despite the locked door, many refugees are resisting attempts to send them back to Athens, determined to keep the hope of a new start alive for them and their families.
A gay rights group in Germany is opening a new home in Berlin for homosexual refugees. The project, in cooperation with the city council, will create shelter for over 120 people. Across Europe, gay migrants are reported to have suffered abuse in refugee shelters, with some being forced to move out. They're refugees like any other refugee, he says, but they're also culturally isolated. And they've experienced a lot of violence. It starts with psychological violence, and then it goes from verbal expressions of disapproval to discrimination and up to physical violence with broken arms, broken noses. There've even been some murder attempts. Journalists investigating saw evidence of a possible cultural clash. Many migrants come from conservative Muslim countries. The Berlin Centre follows another small shelter which has opened in Nuremberg. The Syrian government says it accepts a halt to combat operations in line with a US-Russian ceasefire plan, but it adds that it'll seek to stop armed groups from operating. The main umbrella group for Syrian opposition organisations is also reported to have agreed to a temporary truce due to become effective at the weekend. The truce doesn't apply to two of the most deadly groups, ISIL and the al-Qaeda-linked Nusra Front. Significantly, it allows both government and opposition to use force in self-defence. In Damascus, some expressed hope, but others were sceptical.
It's better not only for the government or for the opposite, no, for all the people in Syria.
It will not work because the terrorists, they don't have any decision maker. They are getting all the decision from the outside politics. And our government, they have decision to stop the fire, but the problem, they will not accept this decision from our government.
All previous attempts to talk peace have failed to stop scenes such as this in Homs. 150 died in bombings there and in Damascus on Sunday. One opposition monitor has said new airstrikes on Tuesday have targeted rebel-held areas.
The foreign ministers of France and Germany are in Ukraine to urge Kiev to continue on its reformist path. The ministers urged the Ukraine government to implement the Minsk II agreement, a deal brokered to end the conflict with pro-Russian separatists in the east of Ukraine. A key sticking point is elections in the disputed Donbass region. Both France and Germany know that electoral law is one thing and preconditions for holding these elections are another. However, we should take care of both issues. And of course, the security issue should not be an excuse for not working on the electoral law.
Die Sicherheitssituation kann keine Entschuldigung dafür sein, dass wir an dem Wahlgesetz nicht arbeiten.
Both ministers are willing to support Ukraine despite the lack of headway in curbing corruption and introducing reform. Our correspondent in Kiev is Maria Korenyuk. The next key meeting will be held in 1 week's time, when the foreign ministers of Ukraine, Russia, Germany and France will gather in Paris on March the 3rd.
Kiev.
One person's been killed in a train crash in the Netherlands. At least 10 others were injured when the passenger train derailed near the town of Dalfsen, some 120 kilometers east of Amsterdam. Carriages toppled over into a field after the train hit a maintenance crane on a crossing at around 9 o'clock this morning. Fortunately, only 15 people or so were travelling on the rush hour service. Eyewitness reports say the maintenance vehicle was slowly crossing the tracks when the crash took place. Under pressure to end the bloodshed in Burundi, Ban Ki-moon appears to have made progress. Just hours before a visit to the Central African nation by the UN Secretary-General, several people were reported killed in gun and grenade attacks. But following talks with Ban, President Pierre Nkurunziza and the opposition have now agreed to engage in inclusive dialogue. The president's decision last year to run for a third term sparked street protests by opponents who claimed this was unconstitutional. His government foiled a coup in May and he won re-election in July, but the poll was disputed and the violence has continued. Hundreds of people have been killed and nearly 250,000 more have been forced to flee their homes.
Aid agencies are rushing to distribute supplies in Fiji, ravaged at the weekend by Cyclone Winston, which left at least 29 dead. These people in Raki on the country's main island are the lucky ones. Many others scattered around the archipelago are much harder to reach. Authorities say the storm was the most powerful on record in the southern hemisphere. Whole villages were flattened by winds of over 300 kilometers an hour. Flimsy dwellings stood no chance. Thousands of Fijians are now doing what they can to salvage their possessions.
We were inside the house, so it was very strong. Damaged everything, so we have to run for our life in the church.
Schools have been closed for 2 weeks, but the destruction means it's bound to be a lot longer before many are up and running again.
We have some very poor students, and I think it'll be very sad for them to see that their schools have been damaged as such, and I don't know if they'll let the students come to the school or find other schools that are available.
Aid workers have warned of possible outbreaks of Zika and dengue viruses, both carried by mosquitoes which flourish in stagnant water. There are fears the death toll could rise once remote islands are reached.
US Republican presidential contender Ted Cruz has fired his main spokesman ahead of the Nevada caucuses. It's over a video that falsely showed rival Marco Rubio dismissing the Bible. Spokesman Rick Tyler had apologized for posting an inaccurate story on the video. Rubio, meanwhile, is enjoying some boosts, not only from the Cruz campaign mishap. He's also secured a string of high-profile endorsements from prominent Republicans. Rubio came second in South Carolina's primary on Saturday. Donald Trump was the big winner in that state, securing a comfortable margin of victory. Opinion polls show Rubio and Cruz running close in Nevada.
Wow, this is something. Wow!